Okay, so we've talked a lot about how you go about crafting your message, how you make sure it's connected with a way that's going to be meaningful to your audience and the sequence. We haven't talked a lot about actual delivery, though, how you deliver that message in a way that's going to be compelling, engaging. And I don't want to generalize, just in our experience, this is often a little uncomfortable for a lot of highly technical people, doesn't necessarily come natural to them. So what advice do you have for learning how to have a more, learning how to and getting comfortable with having a more engaging delivery style? Sarah, you started on the stage as an opera singer. So I believe you have some experience in this area, not to mention you've presented at a lot of conferences. So share some advice.
Oh, I feel like I have an unfair advantage just simply because I have been presenting for so long. It's really about being engaging and telling a story. And the more passionate you are about what you're saying and the more you believe what you're saying, the more you're going to bring people along with you. Also making sure that that content is at the right level. My poor children get so much explanation about technology, and if I know that I can keep them engaged, then for me that's a really great baseline that I'm going to be able to keep a conference audience engaged and really with me along the way. And there's just simple things like making sure that you're not speaking too quickly, take advantage of your pauses, and just really about the confidence. If you don't feel confident, it's one of those things you have to fake it because everyone's going to notice. But also, what took me a really long time is that everyone in the audience, they really just want to see you succeed. I don't think I've been to a single conference where people just wanted to see you fall flat on your face. So know that people are there, they're supporting you. There's a reason you're on that stage as well. They're trying to give a message. There is a message that's coherent, that's beneficial to the audience that's in that room. So really, go with that and make sure that it's there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. John, what would you add?
Well, one of the things that a lot of the participants in our high-tech speaking class have told us, they are self-described introverts. So speaking to their small team, relatively easy. Speaking to a customer group or at a conference setting, they're pretty far outside of their comfort zone. So one of the things, besides the work I do with PowerSpeaking, I have also coached TED speakers. And they did a survey, I think 2 years ago, where they were asking the audience, if you're looking for a speaker who's confident, charismatic, and credible, what are the things you are looking for? And they named 3. We want to hear a voice that's energetic, that conveys a message. I really believe what I'm talking about, because as soon as my voice flattens out, the subliminal message is, I don't even sound like I believe it. So the first thing they highlighted was voice. The second were to use gestures in a way that were descriptive of the content, because a lot of audiences, English is not their first language. So earlier when I mentioned snorkeling, not scuba diving, right away people have a visual image that supports the message. And the third thing they said in the TED research, when appropriate, smile. We like people who look like they're having a good time with what they're talking about. And I would add to that, if you're in a live audience, it's important not just to make eye contact, which can be too fast, where I move from person to person to person to person and don't really connect. So we teach a concept called eye interaction, which for a lot of people is much easier to have a one-on-one conversation for a sentence or two, take a breath, and then talk to somebody else. In the virtual environment, that for me is the greatest challenge that I face. Because right now I am looking at Sarah, but I'm not talking to Sarah. I'm talking to Sarah's picture. Oh, now I'm talking to Sarah. So in a virtual environment, my lens is surrounded by little smiley faces. As my reminder, the audience is in there, not down there. Those are a couple of tips I hope will help the people who have logged on for this call today.
Excellent. Excellent. It's clear that you have decades of experience doing this, John. I love just how tangible and actionable your advice is. And you reminded me very briefly of, I was interviewing a candidate last week who never once looked at the camera. It was obvious that the Zoom session was on another monitor. So this is how he was communicating his value. So it's important advice for a whole host of scenarios. And I see Mary McGlynn has dropped an exceptional resource in chat for us, The Art and Science of Communicating Numbers. Thank you, Mary. Emilio, what would you add to this?
I would add that there's a lot of attentional blindness in the business and technology world. And what I mean by attentional blindness is because of the lack of differentiation in how people speak and present, whether it's at a corporate conference, a keynote speech, or a boardroom presentation, people are used to the same kind of thing again and again and again. So it becomes increasingly difficult to pay attention to that. So an example is out in front of me, behind me, you can see an office building. If I were to pay attention to this office building for a long period of time, no one window would stand out to me. But if somebody were waving a hand at me, I would start to pay attention to them. And I think that sort of metaphor helps me thinking about how I present in the boardroom in terms of coming up with a compelling, different presentation style. I want to be different than how everyone is doing it. I think today, I present differently from Sarah and John. And that makes you more likely to remember me. Now, in the software as a service space, which some of you may work in, you'll see that storytelling is a very popular way of communicating a technology for purchase. So you hear about Johnny the marketer waking up one day and checking to see what inbound leads he has and then passing it along to Sally the salesperson. And that sort of style feels really old to me. It's 10 years old. Almost every company does it. So something that I think about, and hopefully you can take with you to your own work, is to think about how to take those pieces of knowledge about how other people are presenting technically and doing something really different. So in my case, it's using inflection. It's starting off with the point in mind. It's maybe using humor. It's maybe not. It's being provocative in terms of what we suggest people do. But I think that one thing that's in common to what Sarah and John have suggested already is that something that people never get tired of is energy. Another thing that people never get tired of is preparation. Another thing that people never get tired of is a provocative, well-thought point of view. And those are things that I always encourage you to bring to your presentations, no matter how small they are. Now, the second thing that I want to recommend is around preparation. The Beatles, before they got signed, played 626 live shows. And when I think about that, I think about the ways that we as technical professionals can prepare before we present. I mean, it's kind of funny if you think about the fact that we'll spend 800 hours on a technical project, but 8 minutes on the presentation preparation. It's weird, right? And it represents a massive distortion in how we can value our time in preparing for ultimately a presentation that could change our careers, our companies, and our clients' lives. And so something that I really encourage everybody to do here is just practice a lot. Something that I didn't mention earlier on is I'm also a musician. Actually, I went to music school first. And I think something that musicians do really well is we're used to this idea of practicing in isolation by ourselves for hours and hours and hours. So the notion of preparing for a presentation is not something that's arduous or a surprise to us. It's something that musicians are very, very used to. So again, something that I encourage you to do is to practice a lot. And something that I'll tell the story of really quickly is how when I took the PowerSpeaking class, I absolutely cringed when Carrie had to go through a video recording of me presenting to the audience. And something that they do in class that Carrie didn't mention on this is that they'll record you giving a speech for 2 minutes, and then they'll take you aside and give you feedback and point out what you're doing in the presentation. Now, that's really cringe for everybody to deal with, but it's one of the pathways to getting way, way better at this skill. So again, don't be afraid to differentiate. Don't be afraid to bring energy and a provocative point of view, but most importantly, don't be afraid to be like the Beatles and play those 626 shows before you finally get that record deal.